I threw myself in front of a car a while ago because of my ex-girlfriend. So around the time when she left, the pain started to kick in.
XXXTentacion sat in front of a camera for one of his final interviews. And the first sentence out of his mouth wasn't an introduction. It was a confession, and it set the tone for everything after. Rappers are now speaking up, and what they are saying is devastating. The confession he opened with. The clip X dropped in those first few seconds is the kind of admission that usually requires a therapist, a close friend, or years of trust to coax out of someone. He just said it. He chose to begin a documented interview the moment he decided he didn't want to be alive anymore. And the reason he gave was simple. His girlfriend had left.
I threw myself in front of a car a while ago because of my ex-girlfriend. So around the time when she left, the pain started to kick in.
He breaks down the moment with a strange calm. The pain started to kick in. Those are the words he uses, like the heartbreak was a substance entering his bloodstream on a delay. Then almost casually, he describes the next step. He walked into the road. That's the part of the sentence that most people skim past on first listen. He didn't run. He didn't lose control. He didn't act on impulse. He walked. The choice was deliberate, and the language he uses to describe it is the language of someone who has thought about that moment many times since it happened. He's not retelling a panic attack. He's recalling a decision. The detail of what came after is what makes this confession sit so heavy. He didn't get hit head-on. He hit the side of the car, dented it, and was issued a ticket. Not treated like a person in crisis, just a citation for damages. He's narrating a moment that should have been a tragedy as if he's reading off a receipt. And that flat tone is what makes it land harder than if he cried through it. He goes to the hospital with a leg that's barely functional. And even there, he doesn't stay long enough for anyone to actually help him. He pulled the 4 out. He didn't wait for discharge. He didn't sit there processing what had just happened to his leg or his life. He grabbed his phone and he left. The hospital wasn't a stop on a recovery journey. It was an interruption. But the chilling part is what came next. He didn't go home and process. He went to his manager's house, and once he was there, he picked up a fork and tried to put it in the wall. For anyone who hasn't pieced together what that means, he was trying to electrocute himself. The first attempt failed, so he moved on to the second within hours.
So I was too to do it. That was the last time I tried to kill myself.
He calls himself a for not following through. He's framing his own survival as cowardice, which tells you everything about the headspace he was sitting in during that period. Most people who survive a suicide attempt and look back on it later describe it as a moment of clarity, a wake-up call and near miss. He describes it as a failure of nerves. The fact that he's still here is, in his own framing, the result of him being too weak to finish what he started. Then, he closes that whole section out by linking it back to the breakup and dropping a line that fans have been quoting ever since. 2 short sentences, 6 words total. The whole world view, in one breath. Love is poison. Love is pain. For a kid who would go on to make some of the most emotionally raw music of his generation. That one statement reads like the thesis statement of his entire catalog. He's not romanticizing it. He's not turning it into a punchline or a chorus hook. He's saying it the way someone says the sky is blue. He goes on to explain what he means, and the explanation is just as bleak as the headline. He's describing a level of devotion that sounds almost like surrender. Full transparency, no manipulation, total presence. That's the standard he says he held himself to with the girl who left. And what came next wasn't the reward you'd expect for that kind of investment. What makes the moment more chilling in hindsight is the way he keeps using past tense. That was the last time I tried to kill myself. He's framing the suicide attempts as something behind him, something resolved. But the energy in the room doesn't match the words. He's giving the answer of a man who's processed his pain, but the way he's giving it sounds like a man who's walked through fire and is still carrying the smoke. That contradiction is what people keep coming back to when they revisit this clip. The story is closed. The wound isn't. Let me pull the real reactions from rappers when X died, so I can write this accurately. Here's the standalone part. I've used real documented reactions from rappers after his death and framed them around the confession. These are all verifiable quotes from June 2018 when he was killed, and how the rap world reacted changed everything. The hip-hop world's response to X. The interview where X laid out his confession, his philosophy, and his prediction about dying young didn't go viral the day it was filmed. It went viral the day he was shot. On June 18, 2018, XXXTentacion was killed in Broward County, Florida, while leaving a motorcycle shop. He was 20 years old, and the same hip-hop community that had spent the previous year arguing about whether to support him, cancel him, or just ignore him suddenly had to decide what to say in real time with footage of him predicting his own death already circulating across every platform. The reactions came in fast, and they didn't come in clean. The rap world responded to the news the way the rap world responds to everything publicly, contradictory, and at full volume. The biggest name to weigh in first was Kanye West. He posted a tribute that caught a lot of people off guard because the two had never collaborated and Y had never publicly aligned himself with the South Florida scene that X represented. He wrote that he never told X how much he inspired him when he was alive and thanked him for existing. It was short, it was unguarded, and coming from one of the most calculating self-promoters in the genre, it landed differently than it would have from anyone else. Yet wasn't issuing a press statement. He was processing a loss in public, and the people watching could tell the difference. J. Cole's response was the one that surprised everyone the most because Cole and X had public history. X had dissed Cole on his XXL freshman freestyle in 2017, throwing in lines that aimed directly at Cole's name and credibility. Cole had stayed mostly quiet about it at the time. So when the news broke that X was dead, nobody knew which version of Cole was going to show up. The version that showed up was the one nobody expected. Cole wrote that the news had him messed up, calling X a talent with limitless potential and a strong desire to be a better person. The disc got buried in the moment. Whatever beef had existed between them died in the same news cycle. Diplo posted what may have been the most emotional public tribute from a non-rapper in X's circle. He revealed that X had texted him the weekend before he died with plans to work on the next album with him and Skrillex. Diplo had invited him to LA the week of the shooting. He was, in his own telling, waiting to see if X was going to show up. The shooting happened before that trip could occur. Diplo's tribute is one of the few that gives you a sense of what X was actually planning in the days before his death. And the gap between those plans and what actually happened is what made his post hit so hard. Travis Barker, who had collaborated with X, called him a true artist and one of the most talented of his time. Lil Yachty, who had worked with X on records like Triple Cup, wrote that his legacy had to be supported because life isn't promised. Yachty also reposted an old X tweet from 2015 that read, "In retrospect, like a prophecy." X had said he wouldn't be mad to die because his music would live on. Reading that tweet on the day of his death gave it a weight nobody had given it when he posted it 3 years earlier. People were starting to realize that X had been writing his own ending out loud for years. And nobody had read the script carefully enough until the ending arrived. Then there was the closest circle. Ski Mask the Slump God, who had been one of X's earliest collaborators and one of his closest friends from South Florida, posted a picture of his fallen friend on Instagram. The two had a complicated history. They'd publicly fallen out in 2017, but they'd also reunited on stage at Rolling Loud not long before his death, where X told Ski he loved him in front of thousands of fans. That on-stage moment turned into a closing image that the internet replayed on loop after the news broke. Ski's tribute didn't include a long statement. It didn't need one. The 2018 BET Awards happened less than a week after the shooting, and the show became another stage for the response. Meek Mill, Jamie Foxx, and Ski Mask the Slump God paid tribute to X on the BET Awards broadcast in front of a national audience. The performance reframed his death as a moment of mourning for an entire generation of fans, not just for one fan base. It was the kind of mainstream acknowledgement that while he was alive, X had been actively denied because of the controversy surrounding him. But the reaction wasn't unanimous. And that's the part of the story that makes it more honest. There was an open conversation happening in real time about how to mourn an artist who is awaiting trial on serious charges. Some users on social media brought up the pending domestic violence case against him, and the reactions to those people were swift on both sides. One rapper, Lil Aaron, pushed back on the celebrations of his death by writing that being a terrible person doesn't warrant celebrating someone being murdered in cold blood. The line drew a boundary that a lot of people in hip-hop try to hold during that week. You could critique the man and still mourn the killing. You could believe the victim and still feel that murder wasn't justice. The genre tried with mixed success to hold both ideas at once. What made the reactions feel so connected to his confession was timing. The interview where he talked about dying young, where he said, "If I don't die, let's hope I don't die." Where he predicted that the same people criticizing him would worship him within a year. That footage was already being passed around hip-hop circles before he died. After he was killed, that footage didn't just resurface. It became the lens through which his death was understood. Every tribute that mentioned his potential and his desire to be a better person was a tribute that was intentionally or not responding to the version of himself he had laid out in clips like this one. The hip-hop world wasn't just mourning a young rapper. It was mourning the rapper who had told them he might not make it and finding out that he hadn't. Years later, the reactions kept coming. In 2020, Hip Hop DX ran a feature where artists reflected on X's legacy, and the conversation hadn't been simplified. Some artists still wrestled with the contradictions. Some had moved on. Some had built entire bodies of work that referenced him directly. The clips of him talking about evolution, sacrifice, and dying young kept getting reposted, and the reactions kept evolving along with them. The wound that started it all. After the Love is Poison section, the interviewer pivots and asks X about his father. This is the question that in most rap interviews gets a long answer. Childhood is the section every rapper has rehearsed because every rapper has been asked about it before. X's response is one of the shortest moments in the entire conversation, and it's also one of the loudest.
What's that? What's a father?
That's the answer. It's a deflection on the surface, but listen to the words instead of the tone. He's not saying he doesn't want to talk about it. He's not saying it's complicated. He's pretending the word itself doesn't register, like he's hearing a foreign language and asking for a translation. The dismissal is the answer. The fact that he won't even define the word for the cameras is the definition of his relationship with the man. A lot of artists answer father questions with a story. They mention prison, addiction, abandonment, distance, divorce, death. They give you a narrative art. X gives you a question mark. He refuses the premise of the question. He's saying, in effect, you can't ask me about something that wasn't there. Then, he immediately changes the subject. He doesn't say next question, or I don't want to talk about that. He just twists the conversation onto a different track entirely, asking if he can twist the question into one about what he wants people to know about him. The interviewer follows him there, because what other choice is there? You can't pry information out of someone who has just told you the file doesn't exist. But the father's question doesn't actually leave the room. It comes back later in the same interview. And when it does, X gives the answer he refused to give the first time. He just doesn't frame it as an answer about his father. He frames it as an answer about his anger. He's talking about why fear stopped working as a deterrent for him as a kid. He'd reached an age where nobody in his life could scare him into behaving. And then he gives the line that explains the silence from earlier in the interview.
Dad got locked up when I was like 10.
There it is. The father showed up not when the interviewer asked about him directly, not in a section labeled Early Life. The father showed up as collateral damage in a different conversation, almost as an aside in the middle of X explaining why he stopped being afraid of anyone. Dad got locked up when he was 10. That's the whole story he refused to tell earlier, delivered in 7 words while he's actually trying to talk about something else. He's laying out the chain of cause and effect. The father went away. The fear of the father went with him. After that, there was nobody in the household who could put a check on his behavior the way a father figure does. He poses the questions himself. Was he supposed to fear his mom? Was he supposed to fear some random adult who showed up in his life? In his framing, both options were rhetorical. The answer was no. You go back and listen to the "what's a father" moment again with this context, and the meaning shifts. He wasn't being flippant. He wasn't being clever for the camera. He was telling the truth in the most compressed way he could manage. What's a father? Something that disappears when you're 10 and never comes back. Something whose absence is the loudest thing in the house. Something you stop having a relationship with because you stopped having one at all. And it sets up the next section of the conversation perfectly, because once you understand that the father left and the fear left with him, you understand exactly why the kid sitting in that chair turned into the artist that the world would later argue about.
Fear left, so anger replaced it.
The space the fear used to occupy didn't stay empty. Something else moved in to fill it. He says it himself in the very next breath. That's the bridge into everything that came next. The car incident, the school fights, the knives, the criminal record, the persona, the music. All of it traces back to the moment a 10-year-old kid in South Florida realized that the man whose presence used to keep him in line wasn't coming home. And the version of the world he'd been living in until then was over. The interview gives you the timeline in pieces, but those pieces all point to the same starting line. He wasn't born angry. He inherited the absence first, and the anger was the room the absence left behind. The years he couldn't stop fighting. Once X explains that fear left him at 10, the rest of the conversation about violence in his life becomes a different kind of story. It's not the story of a troubled kid the way news headlines have framed it. It's the story of a kid who lost the only emotional regulator he had and watched his behavior reorganize itself around what was left. He's diagnosing himself in real time. He's not using therapy language. He's not asking you to feel sorry for him. He's pointing at the mechanism. The fear was safety. When the safety came off, the anger had nothing in its way. It took control of the trigger. Whatever someone threw at him, he threw something back, and he threw it back without the filter that fear provides for most people. Most kids feel the impulse to swing, and then they think about consequences. Getting in trouble at school, getting in trouble at home, getting in trouble with the people they're angry at, and the fear of those consequences slows them down. He had the impulse, and nothing slowed it down. The fear that was supposed to be sitting in between the impulse and the action wasn't there anymore. He moves from there into a section about how the rules of fighting itself changed during the years he was coming up. And his framing is that the world got more dangerous around him at the same time that he got less afraid of it. Back when he was younger, there was a code. Two people had a problem. They smoked together. They fought it out. They moved on. The fight was the resolution, not the escalation. You didn't fear for your life when you stepped to someone because the worst-case scenario was a busted lip in a story.
Now it's different. Now we're gonna kill each other. I was young and I was an idiot.
The whole structure of conflict shifted under his feet. Now nobody just fights. Now everybody is armed. He calls his younger self an idiot for not understanding that because he was still operating on the old code while everyone around him had upgraded to a new one. He was throwing punches in a world where people were drawing pistols. This is one of the smartest stretches of the entire interview, and it gets buried under everything else he says. He's articulating a philosophy of conflict that someone 5 times his age might come up with. There are only 2 ways an interaction can end at this point in his world. Either the other person respects you mentally and you can both walk away, or the other person reaches for a weapon and one of you doesn't walk away at all. Punching has been removed from the menu because punching doesn't settle anything anymore. He's flipping the whole frame. The person who pulls the weapon isn't the strong one in his eyes. They're the ones who couldn't compete with words, so they had to compete with bullets. He's saying the gun is the white flag of the mind. It's an admission that you couldn't hold the conversation. He extends the same logic to fist fights. The fist is also a confession of intellectual defeat in his framework. By the time someone is touching you, the conversation has already been lost. He's giving you a pyramid of conflict where the top is words, the middle is hands, and the bottom is weapons. And the people at the bottom are the ones who failed at the top. But even with that philosophy, he tells the camera he's still armed. The knife isn't there to start something. The knife is there because he's done starting things. That's the contradiction he's living with. He believes in the supremacy of the mind. He thinks fighting is a sign that you've already lost the argument. And he still won't leave the house without something on his hip because the world he's operating in doesn't care what his philosophy is. He's pointing at the same problem from a different angle. The conversation is gone. Even when he wants to use his words, the other person might already have decided that words aren't enough. And in that scenario, his mouth doesn't just fail to win. It can get him killed. He says it like it's a weather forecast. They're going to put a bullet in his brain right in the neck if he says the wrong thing to the wrong person. He's not posturing. He's not boasting. He's describing the math of the streets he's living on. He closes the whole section out by trying to clarify the record. He wasn't a fighter by choice. He wasn't going around looking for problems. He was reacting to a world where his anger had no governor and the people around him had no patience. Sometimes a fight came to him, and the wiring inside him meant that whatever showed up at his door, he answered. He says outright that he wasn't looking for a fight and never had been. He just did it because sometimes he had to. The chilling part of the section isn't any single line. It's the cumulative picture. A teenager who lost his fear at 10. A young adult who can describe his own violent decade with the detachment of a researcher. A man who carries a knife because he's tired of fighting in a world where talking might get him shot. And the whole time he's young enough that he should still be figuring out what he wants to be, instead of explaining how he survived being what he already was. The philosophy he tried to leave behind. If the interview had ended after the violence section, it would have been a sad story about a kid who got dealt a bad hand and ended up swinging at the world. But X doesn't let the conversation stop there. He pivots into something nobody asks him to pivot into. He starts teaching. He uses the camera the way a preacher uses a pulpit. And what comes out is a worldview that he had clearly been thinking about for a long time before anyone pointed a microphone at him.
The whole point of the human race and the human mind in itself is evolution.
That's how he opens the philosophy section. Evolution, not money, not fame, not music. Evolution. He's telling you what he thinks human beings are for. And the answer is growth. 2 ideas fused into one statement. Evolution and creation. The point of being alive in his frame is to evolve. And the way you do that is by making things. He goes on to point at the room around him. The table, the chair, the mic, the camera, the hat. Everything was created. You created. It's almost like he's running a lesson. The world is a series of created things. You are a created thing. Every object you're looking at was made by somebody. Therefore, the act of making is the only honest response to the world that made you. He repeats the thesis to make sure it lands. And then he goes from there into something more abstract. He starts talking about the laws of the universe like he's a teenager, just discovered metaphysics, except the way he says it doesn't sound like a phase. It sounds like he found something real, and he's trying to hand it off to whoever is watching.
So anything that takes away the power of your mind is keeping you still and delaying your evolution.
That's where the philosophy gets its teeth. Whatever shrinks your mind is delaying your evolution, which means it's making you wrong. He's about to list the laws he wants people to study. And the list is unusual, coming from a 19-year-old rapper. Attraction, abundance, equivalent exchange, cause and effect, the karmic cycle. Those are not throwaway terms. He's pulling from spirituality, from manifestation culture, even from anime philosophy in the case of equivalent exchange. He's a kid who reads, and he's a kid who pieced together his own theology out of the pieces he had access to. He's stacking systems, trying to build a complete picture of how he thinks reality works. And then he drops into the most unsettling part of the philosophy section. Reality in his telling is something you can edit from inside your own head. Whatever you think becomes the thing you live inside. That's not a casual claim. He claims personal experience with astral projection. He's saying he's done this. He's saying you can do it too if you slow down enough. He's a 19-year-old with a SoundCloud catalog telling you that he's been outside of his body, and he wants to teach you how to get there. He frames it as a window. There's a period in your life where the world isn't on top of you yet. And during that period, your job is to free your mind, because once the weight comes down, the freedom gets harder to find. Reach the place where the world doesn't have a grip on you, where every situation is just a frame you can step out of, slave to this realm. That's the alternative. There's no middle ground in his system. Either you free yourself or your property. And then he says the line that in retrospect sounds the loudest.
The whole goal is you live and then you die. You can die plenty times while you're alive.
You can die plenty of times while you're alive. He's not talking about literal death. He's talking about the deaths of versions of yourself. The boy who walked into the road. The kid whose father got locked up. The teenager who couldn't stop swinging. Each of those people died inside him in his telling. And the man on the camera was the survivor of all those funerals. That's a strange admission to drop in the middle of a section about teaching astral projection to other people. He says he can't have it. Not that he can't do it, that he can't have it, as in there's no rest in it for him. He's wicked in his own assessment. And the rest that astral projection might offer to someone else isn't available to him personally. The teacher is locked out of his own classroom. He's giving away what he can't keep. He pivots from there to defining what makes a good person. Ideals, motives, care for others. It's a list that anyone could agree with, but then he keeps adding to the list, and the list gets harder.
Someone that's willing to sacrifice.
Risk, pain. Those aren't optional in his definition of goodness. A good person in his frame has to be someone who can stand inside fire. Sacrifice. That's the word he ends on. Goodness equals sacrifice. And whether or not he believed the rest of his philosophy, this part of it he was already living out. The interview itself was a sacrifice. He was burning a private version of himself in front of a camera so that some kid watching at home could find the matches. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.